In the suburban town of Oak Ridge, Illinois, nestled between shopping plazas and quiet cul-de-sacs, John Mercer was known as a model teacher. His classroom at Oak Ridge Middle School was a place of order, intellect, and gentle encouragement. For over a decade, Mercer taught 7th grade English, where he was revered for his thoughtful demeanor, classical literature references, and dedication to his students' development. Parents trusted him implicitly. He was the teacher who volunteered for every school event, who stayed late for tutoring, who always had a kind word for a struggling child. But beneath the surface of his well-pressed shirts and soft-spoken lectures, John Mercer wasn't who he claimed to be. His real name was Daniel Wyatt, a wanted fugitive, and his classroom was a carefully constructed lie, one that would eventually collapse under the weight of his past and reveal a series of crimes that had followed him from state to state for over 2 decades. Daniel Wyatt had once been a teacher in Vermont under his birth name, where he was accused of inappropriate conduct with a student in 1986. Though the charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence, Wyatt quietly resigned, changed his name legally in another state, and began a new life as John Mercer, burying his past with a forged identity and false documents. He drifted through small-town schools, never staying long, until Oak Ridge, where he laid down roots, married a local librarian, and became a pillar of the community. His reinvention was so complete that no one ever questioned his origins. No red flags appeared during his background checks, and Mercer was careful to keep his digital footprint minimal, never posting photos, never connecting with former colleagues, always controlling the narrative. NBUT in 2004, a routine district audit of teaching credentials, part of a post-9/11 identity verification effort, led to questions about Mercer's certification records. A clerical discrepancy triggered a deeper check, and within days, investigators found that John Mercer's university records did not exist under that name. What followed was a quiet confrontation. Mercer was called into a meeting with district officials, where he appeared calm, offering to sort out the mistake. But when he failed to return home that evening, his wife alerted the police. John Mercer had vanished. The FBI was contacted, and with fingerprints from his employment file, they quickly matched Mercer to Daniel Wyatt, who had been on a low-priority watch list for years. But the real horror began when police searched Mercer's home and uncovered locked filing cabinets filled with personal files on students, photographs, journals, and audio recordings. Most disturbing were the notebooks, meticulously organized, documenting the behavior, routines, and vulnerabilities of dozens of children he had taught over the years, including coded annotations, psychological assessments, and disturbing fantasies written as stories. The documents suggested that Mercer had been grooming select students, manipulating them emotionally, and in some cases, abusing them under the guise of private tutoring sessions. As word spread, the town erupted in shock and disbelief. Parents demanded answers. Former students came forward, recalling uncomfortable moments, late-night calls, and secretive meetings at Mercer's home, where he had allegedly offered mentorship programs for gifted students. One former student, now an adult, recalled being touched inappropriately, but had dismissed it at the time as accidental. With the discovery of Mercer's journals and tapes, a horrifying pattern emerged. Spanning at least 3 states with multiple victims, FBI launched a multi-state manhunt, and after 4 months, Mercer was found living under yet another alias in Colorado, working as a tutor for homeschooled children. He was arrested without incident. In court, he remained cold and emotionless, refusing to speak. His wife filed for divorce. The trial revealed a lifetime of deception, with decades of manipulation, grooming, and systematic abuse hidden behind the veil of a trusted educator. Mercer was convicted on 14 counts of child endangerment, sexual abuse, and fraudulent identity use, receiving life imprisonment without parole. NTHE's scandal led to nationwide reforms in how schools verify teacher identities, mandating biometric background checks, and creating a federal educator database to prevent such deceptions in the future. Oak Ridge Middle School was renamed, its administration replaced, and the community left grappling with a truth they never saw coming. The man they trusted most had lived a lie behind the chalkboard and left scars that would last for generations. In the quiet town of Maple Glen, Ontario, the local high school stood as a fixture of small-town life, a place where generations of students passed through the same aging hallways, learned under the same aging faculty, and trusted that nothing ever truly changed. One of its most respected figures was Mr. Roger Halden, a history teacher known for his encyclopedic knowledge, crisp blazers, and stoic presence. For nearly 20 years, Halden taught World War history, drawing admiration for his engaging lectures, his rare antique maps, and the way he connected past atrocities to modern morality. But beneath this cultivated image, Halden was hiding a sinister truth that would only come to light when a student went missing, and all eyes turned to the teacher no one really knew at all. In October 1998, Clara Winton, a 16-year-old student, vanished after school. She was last seen leaving Halden's classroom, where she had been helping him catalog old textbooks for a history fair. Her parents raised the alarm by nightfall, and a town-wide search was initiated. Halden, when questioned, claimed she had left around 4:15 p.m. and headed toward the bus stop. His calm demeanor and cooperation earned him little scrutiny at first, but as days passed and no trace of Clara was found, rumors began to spread. Students whispered about Halden's basement, a place few had seen but many had heard of. A private museum, he claimed, full of artifacts, war relics, and historical documents. NTHE turning point came when Clara's friend, Sophia, revealed to police that Clara had been uncomfortable around Halden recently. He had asked her to stay late frequently, and once commented on how she reminded him of a girl from his past. That detail raised red flags. Investigators obtained a warrant to search Halden's house, a 2-story Victorian on the edge of town, cluttered with books, antiques, and locked rooms. In the basement, they found a concealed door hidden behind a shelf, leading to a soundproof chamber equipped with surveillance equipment, chains, and mattresses. On the walls were photos of young girls, all students from Maple Glen High, some going back 15 years. Clara was found bound but alive, her hair shaved, her clothes replaced with a vintage dress, in a room lit only by a single bulb. Halden had created a private world, reenacting historical scenarios with his victims, forcing them to live as, quote, figures of history, all under the guise of education. His obsession had evolved over time. His journals revealed delusions of historical correction, where he believed these girls could be cleansed of modern corruption by living as obedient figures of the past. He referred to Clara as the 19th century girl, and in a chilling passage wrote, "In silence, she becomes real. History breathes through her." The modern world must not taint her. Further searches revealed hidden videotapes, documenting sessions of psychological control, where Halden gave lectures to the girls, punished them for breaking period rules, and conducted bizarre rituals, including naming ceremonies, where he would rename them after historical figures. 3 other girls came forward after Halden's arrest, confessing they had been taken to his home under false pretenses in prior years, subjected to psychological torment, and released with threats of exposure if they spoke. Halden was arrested and charged with kidnapping, unlawful confinement, sexual assault, and psychological abuse. In court, he remained expressionless, even when Clara testified. He offered no defense beyond stating, quote, "They needed to understand the past. I only helped them live it." He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, with the judge calling his crimes a descent into madness cloaked in intellect. After his conviction, Maple Glen was never the same. The high school underwent a complete overhaul, Halden's classroom sealed, and a memorial garden created for survivors. The town held candlelight vigils, but many residents still struggled to process how a teacher, so trusted, could have built a chamber of horrors beneath their feet, where education became control and history was twisted into a nightmare. In the village of St. Aldwyn's, located in the rural countryside of Somerset, England, the small population prided itself on tradition, discipline, and a certain unspoken order that permeated the town's narrow streets and fog-laced mornings. The local secondary school, St. Aldwyn's Collegiate, was a relic of the past. Red brick walls, oak-paneled halls, and a faculty that had changed little over the decades. Among them was Edwin Carter, the chemistry teacher, a quiet, methodical man in his early 50s, known for his impeccable lab demonstrations, his strict classroom decorum, and a lifelong dedication to science that many found admirable, if not a little obsessive. Carter rarely spoke outside of class, lived alone in a cottage at the edge of town, and spent most of his weekends locked in the school's laboratory, where he claimed to be preparing lesson materials and maintaining equipment. For years, his presence was accepted, unquestioned, until a series of strange illnesses began affecting students, and the town would learn that Carter's experiments were never meant for education. NTHE. First signs came in the winter of 2013, when 3 students, all from Carter's advanced chemistry class, fell ill with similar symptoms: disorientation, nosebleeds, and memory lapses. Doctors initially attributed it to stress, possibly environmental factors, but over the next month, more cases emerged. 10 students, then 15, all reporting blackouts, vivid dreams, and a persistent, metallic taste in their mouths. Parents became alarmed. The school dismissed the concerns, citing flu season, but some students began to suspect a link. All those affected had recently participated in a special lab project with Mr. Carter involving experimental reactions that were not part of the syllabus. One parent, Margaret Hill, whose son had been hospitalized after a severe episode, demanded answers. When she attempted to retrieve her son's personal belongings from the school, she noticed strange residue on his backpack, a faint iridescent dust that shimmered in the light. Taking it to a local chemist, she learned it contained rare heavy metals, including traces of thallium, a highly toxic substance rarely used outside of industrial laboratories. Alarmed, she contacted authorities, and within days, public health officials descended on the school, shutting down the science wing for inspection. What they found was deeply disturbing. In the locked storage cabinets of Carter's lab were vials of restricted substances, many unlabeled, and a handwritten journal documenting experimental trials not authorized by the school or the national curriculum. Carter had been conducting unlicensed experiments, exposing students to airborne compounds under the guise of educational demonstrations, all while monitoring their reactions in secret. His journal included detailed notations on each student's physical responses, noting their names, symptoms, and even psychological changes observed during class. And Carter was arrested on the spot. In his initial statement, he insisted the experiments were harmless, designed to study cognitive thresholds, and, quote, help students unlock untapped potential through exposure to reactive stimuli. But forensic analysis revealed that some of the substances used were banned, and several students had been subjected to chronic low-level poisoning over weeks, leading to long-term neurological damage. One student, Emma Langley, would later suffer permanent memory loss. Investigators uncovered Carter's hidden laboratory notebook, which revealed that his obsession with human reaction to chemical influence dated back 20 years, with failed trials in previous schools, institutions he left under vague circumstances. Further digging showed sealed records from 2 prior schools where Carter had been quietly dismissed, with non-disclosure agreements barring staff from speaking about disciplinary incidents. In court, Carter remained emotionless, often reciting chemical equations or quoting scientific literature, refusing to acknowledge the harm caused. He was declared mentally fit to stand trial and convicted on multiple counts of reckless endangerment, illegal possession of controlled substances, and unauthorized human experimentation. He received 30 years to life, with the judge calling him, quote, a scientist who lost all ethical compass and treated children as lab rats. NTHE town of St. Aldwyn's was left reeling. The school underwent decontamination, and the science department was completely dismantled. Parents sought justice through civil suits, while Carter's former students struggled with health issues, anxiety, and the betrayal of a man who had pretended to educate them but saw them only as variables in an experiment. In the beachside town of Byron Cove, New South Wales, the rhythm of life moves slowly, paced by waves, weekend markets, and the warm familiarity of neighbors who'd known each other for decades. The local high school, Byron Cove Secondary, was modest. Low buildings weathered by salt air, fields dotted with gum trees, and an auditorium that echoed every sound like a cathedral. Within that space ruled Anthony "Tony" Delaney, the school's music teacher for over 18 years, a man known for his passion, charisma, and a gift for pulling beauty out of silence. Students loved him. He called them his prodigies, and in turn, they filled his room after hours, eager for solos, practice time, and the opportunity to impress a teacher who seemed to see something special in each of them. But beneath Tony Delaney's charm lay a secret, a room beneath the auditorium, a place he had built himself over years, hidden behind soundproof walls and piano stands. And inside that room, Delaney committed a decade of unspeakable crimes, masked by the very music he celebrated. Delaney was a fixture of Byron Cove, performing at community events, directing school musicals, and serving as a judge in local talent shows. He was known for his open-door policy, encouraging students to drop in any time for private coaching. His classroom walls were lined with photos of former students, framed programs from concerts, and shelves of vinyl records. Parents trusted him completely. He spoke eloquently, dressed sharply, and often told stories of his own struggles as a youth, finding salvation through music. What no one knew was that Delaney had modified the school's storage basement, which connected to the auditorium via an old maintenance tunnel. Over years, he turned it into a private studio, complete with mattresses, recording equipment, soundproof insulation, and a lock only he could open. Students often spoke about special lessons Delaney offered to his most promising protégés. He would select a handful each year, usually younger teens, and tell them he wanted to help them refine their sound, offering one-on-one mentorship that would help them go professional. They were flattered. It was an honor. These sessions always took place after hours, sometimes on weekends. The students told their parents. Parents trusted Delaney. He was, after all, the school's Teacher of the Year, 5 years running. In 2009, one of Delaney's recent prodigies, Jamie Rourke, age 14, went missing after a late-night session. His parents reported that he had gone to the school for extra rehearsal. Delaney claimed he had never arrived. A search ensued, with police combing the school grounds, but no trace of Jamie was found. What they didn't know was that Jamie had attempted to escape Delaney's hidden room. Injured and frightened, Jamie had left behind bloodied clothing hidden in a crawlspace. Days later, a janitor discovered the clothing and police returned with warrants. Breaking through a disguised wall behind Delaney's office, officers found the hidden studio dark and cold, lined with recordings, photographs, and an archive of abuse. Jamie was found alive, traumatized, hidden behind debris in a far corner. He had escaped Delaney's control, but couldn't reach the exit before Delaney discovered his absence and left to cover his tracks. NTHE evidence found in that room was staggering. Hundreds of tapes, some going back over a decade, showing Delaney manipulating and abusing students under the pretense of vocal coaching, sometimes while playing music loud enough to mask cries. His journals cataloged every victim, detailed their progress, and included chilling reflections. They give everything for the song. That's when they're purest. That's when I take them. Delaney was arrested trying to flee the state, and in court, he refused to speak beyond a single statement. Music is power. I only gave them what they wanted, to be special, to be remembered. He was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. NTHE aftermath broke Byron Cove. Over 40 former students came forward, many now adults, revealing decades of grooming, abuse, and silence. The school was renamed, the auditorium demolished, and Delaney's house burned down in an act of arson, presumed to be revenge by one of his victims. The community remains haunted by the songs they once cherished, now tainted by the man who taught them. In the city of Lyon, France, tucked between centuries-old buildings and cobbled streets slick with rain, stood École Saint-Benoît, a prestigious private school known for its rigorous academics and emphasis on fine arts. It was a place where tradition was worn like a second skin, the uniforms strict, the expectations higher, and the walls covered with student artwork, curated and framed in perfect rows. Overseeing the school's renowned art department was Geneviève Moreau, a woman whose enigmatic presence and unparalleled talent made her a fixture in the lives of every student who passed through her studio. Moreau was an institution in herself. For nearly 30 years she taught at Saint Benoît, her methods unorthodox, her standards unforgiving, and her favor something every student craved. But beneath her calm smile and the scent of linseed oil that followed her like perfume, Moreau harbored a secret, one that would come to light when a student's painting revealed more than art, and the school's darkest legacy was dragged into the light. Moreau's classroom was unlike any other in the school, dimly lit by tall, arched windows, filled with antique easels, aged canvases, and a sense of hush, as though the room itself demanded reverence. She was known for handpicking students each year to join her private mentorship, a program unlisted in official curricula but deeply coveted. Those selected were given keys to her personal studio on the school's top floor, a space shrouded in privacy where she claimed to help them find their inner vision. Many students who passed through the mentorship went on to win national awards, their works featured in galleries across Europe. Parents viewed her as a guiding light, capable of shaping artistic prodigies out of raw talent, but few questioned what went on behind those locked studio doors, or why, over the years, certain students seemed to vanish quietly, transferred without explanation, or simply never seen again after graduation. In March 2011, Émile Duray, a 17-year-old student in Moreau's mentorship, began behaving strangely. Once outgoing, he became withdrawn, his once vibrant artwork turning dark and disturbing. One painting, displayed during a student showcase, depicted a distorted face, pale, mouth sewn shut, surrounded by hands reaching from darkness. The painting caused a stir, but when questioned, Émile said only, "She told me to paint the truth." Days later, Émile was found unconscious in the school's basement, having apparently fallen from a flight of stairs. He was hospitalized in critical condition. During the investigation, police searched Émile's belongings and found a sketchbook, its pages filled with repetitive symbols, eyes, and a recurring phrase, "The quiet ones live forever." Alarmed, authorities turned their attention to Moreau's studio, which she initially refused to open. Upon forced entry, investigators discovered a space unlike any they had imagined. The studio was filled with unfinished portraits, all of former students, many of whom could not be accounted for in current alumni records. Along one wall hung a massive canvas, half-finished, portraying a group of students trapped behind glass, reaching out, their faces eerily accurate, including one of Emile painted before his accident. In a locked cabinet, police found journals, meticulously detailing her mentorship sessions, with notes on each student's fears, traumas, and emotional triggers. NTHE journals hinted at psychological manipulation, with entries describing how she would isolate students, deprive them of sleep, and force them to paint through the hour of truth, midnight sessions in which they were pushed to bleed onto the canvas. Some entries referenced the ritual of silence, where students were forbidden to speak for days, communicating only through art. One chilling passage read, "When the voice is silenced, the soul paints its confession. That is when they belong to me." And as the investigation deepened, it was discovered that 4 former students, all part of her mentorship, had gone missing over the years. Their disappearances had been explained as family relocations, but the records were sparse, with no follow-up. When police dug further, they found that Moreau had reported them as transfers, with forged signatures from guardians. The students were never seen again. During her arrest, Moreau remained calm, insisting that her mentorship was sacred and that those students had transcended their limits. In court, evidence was presented of psychological abuse, with multiple former students testifying about being locked in the studio for days, forced to paint, while Moreau watched silently, whispering mantras about purity, silence, and art as surrender. She was convicted on charges of abuse, unlawful confinement, and suspicion of involvement in disappearances, though the bodies of the missing students were never found. NTHE School's art department was shut down permanently. Moreau's studio was sealed, her paintings confiscated. Rumors persist to this day that some paintings contained hidden clues, that the missing students' final moments were encoded in brushstrokes, waiting for someone to see. To this day, residents of Lyons speak of the teacher who painted with silence, who turned art into a weapon, and left behind a gallery of ghosts no one will ever forget. On the outskirts of Nkutu, a small town nestled in the rugged hills of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, the landscape is dominated by acacia trees, red earth, and the endless stretch of sun-scorched plains. At the center of this remote community stood Langwane High School, a place where resources were scarce, but the commitment to education ran deep. It was here that Mr. Thulani Mabaso, the school's biology teacher, built a reputation as a man devoted to both science and sustainability. He led the school's agriculture program, teaching students to raise livestock, grow medicinal herbs, and harvest indigenous plants for study and sustenance. Under his leadership, a previously unused plot of land behind the school was transformed into a thriving garden and small animal farm. To the community, he was more than a teacher. He was a provider, a man who turned barren soil into something fruitful. But in 2004, that garden would become the site of an investigation that horrified a nation as students began to disappear, and Mr. Mabaso's garden was found to be fertilized with something far darker than earth and bone meal. It began with the disappearance of Lindawe McKees, a quiet, intelligent 15-year-old who had excelled in Mr. Mabaso's biology class and was selected for his special after-school program called Guardians of the Soil. The program focused on advanced botany and zoology, and Mabaso only chose a handful of students each year, those he claimed had a true connection to the land. Lindiwe was honored to be selected, and her parents proudly attended the initiation ceremony, where students took oaths under the old baobab tree near the garden. But weeks later, she vanished. Mabaso told the school that Lindiwe had moved with relatives to Durban, providing a letter her parents had never seen. The school believed him. No one questioned the teacher who had fed them for years. Soon, another student went missing, then another, all members of Guardians of the Soil. Parents raised concerns, but Mabaso reassured them, citing family emergencies, illnesses, and in one case, a scholarship to a private school. His calm authority and elaborate paperwork kept suspicions at bay until a fire broke out in the garden's storage shed, and what firefighters found beneath the charred floorboards could no longer be buried. NTHE, remains of 3 students were discovered, bones meticulously cleaned, arranged in a spiral pattern beneath the soil, alongside glass jars containing preserved organs, labeled in Mabaso's neat handwriting. Police immediately arrested him, and the ensuing investigation uncovered a ritualistic pattern that Mabaso had followed for years. In his home, authorities found journals, diagrams, and herbal concoction recipes, some marked with students' names and dates of harvesting. His writings referred to an ancient Zulu belief in ukufila ngomzimba, to live through the body, suggesting that by consuming and absorbing students, he could transcend mortality. The garden, once praised for its bountiful harvest, was found to be fertilized with human remains, ground and mixed into the soil. Students who had worked with Mabaso reported being told to never question the origins of the red powder he used to enrich the plants and to participate in purity rituals before entering the greenhouse. One student, Namusa Kumalo, described being forced to drink a bitter tea and recite chants about life, death, and renewal, while Mabaso circled them with a carved staff. During his trial, Mabaso claimed he was chosen by the land, that the students volunteered to be part of a greater natural cycle. He showed no remorse, insisting that their deaths were returns to the soil and that he had merely facilitated their rebirth. He was convicted of multiple counts of murder, abuse of minors, and illegal possession of human remains, sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. He died in prison 2 years later, under mysterious circumstances, his body found covered in strange markings, with soil packed under his fingernails. NTHE School's garden was bulldozed, and the land left fallow. A memorial was erected for the lost students, though many families refused to participate, unable to reconcile the ritualistic desecration with any form of closure. Even now, locals say the earth in that place never grew green again, and that at night, the wind carries whispers, voices of children, lost in a garden that promised life but only gave death. In the sleepy town of Crestview, British Columbia, the winters were long and the silence longer, broken only by the rustling of pines or the distant sound of snowplows carving through drifts. Life in Crestview revolved around the rhythms of the seasons and the comings and goings at Crestview Regional High School, a building as old as the town itself, its halls filled with creaks, whispers, and the lingering air of forgotten decades. For 25 years, the school's history department had been ruled by Mr. Leonard Bishop, a reclusive, severe man with a voice like dry paper and an obsession with preserving the past. Bishop was the kind of teacher students feared more than respected, meticulous, stern, always watching. But to the administration, he was indispensable. He alone managed the school's archives, a sprawling collection of records, yearbooks, photographs, and student files dating back a century, housed in a locked wing of the building few ever entered. For decades, no one questioned what Bishop kept in those rooms, until a routine renovation in 1998 exposed a sealed chamber, filled not with dusty books, but evidence of a decades-long reign of terror, and the vanished students Crestview had tried to forget. NTHE incident that unraveled Bishop's secret began innocently. The school was undergoing electrical upgrades, and work crews needed access to a maintenance corridor that ran behind the archive wing. When they broke through a plastered-over door, they found a small, windowless room, dry, cold, and lined with filing cabinets not listed in any school inventory. Inside were hundreds of files, each marked with a student's name, date, and a handwritten note in red ink. Some notes were short, weak, unworthy, corrected. Others included detailed observations: resistant, watched too much, no longer a problem. Alongside the files were boxes of personal effects, hair clips, watches, school ID cards, and, in one drawer, a stack of photographs showing students bound, blindfolded, and in one horrifying image, a student lying lifeless on the floor of what appeared to be Bishop's office. Police were called immediately. Bishop was found at his home, unfazed, sipping tea in a room filled with old newspapers, maps, and school yearbooks stacked to the ceiling. Upon arrest, he said only, "They were erased to preserve the timeline. History must not be corrupted." In the days that followed, investigators pieced together a pattern dating back over 2 decades. Bishop had been abducting students, primarily those he deemed anomalies. Students who stood out, questioned authority, or didn't fit his rigid idea of historical continuity. He believed he was curating the present, ensuring that only the right kind of student advanced. Bishop's personal journal, found hidden beneath floorboards in his office, revealed a twisted philosophy that every generation must be edited, that the present must align with an ideal past, and that students who disrupted the narrative had to be removed. He wrote of quiet corrections, erasing errors and preserving the school's legacy. His methods included abduction, psychological torment, and in at least 5 confirmed cases, murder. He kept detailed logs of each correction, noting the student's deviation and the method of erasure. Many students were listed as dropouts, but when cross-referenced, it was discovered that over 30 students had disappeared under his tenure. Their families, misled, told their children had run away, transferred, or been expelled. In court, Bishop refused legal counsel, insisting he would represent himself. During proceedings, he delivered long monologues about historical cycles, the rot of modern youth, and the need for purification through curation. He referred to himself not as a teacher but as the archivist, claiming he was chosen by history to protect its integrity. He showed no remorse. He was found guilty on multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and abuse, sentenced to life imprisonment, where he died 3 years later, writing his final volumes on scraps of paper covered in dates, names, and drawings of empty classrooms. Crestview High School permanently shut down the archive wing, which has remained sealed. The town built a memorial for the lost students, though the scars of the truth that a man they trusted shaped not only their children's education, but their fates, remain raw. Some say Bishop's presence lingers in the school, especially in the history classrooms, where students still report hearing pages turning and whispers about being watched. The echoes of a man who believed that history wasn't written by the victors, but by the ones who erased the rest. In the quiet coastal city of Hakodate, nestled at the southern tip of Hokkaido, Japan, where fog rolls in thick from the sea and the nights are lit only by lanterns and distant ship lights, stood Higashi Private Academy, an elite boarding school known for its strict discipline, rigorous academic standards, and near-total isolation. The school, perched atop a forested hill, was surrounded by mist-shrouded woods and a tall iron fence that kept the world at bay. For years, parents from across Japan sent their brightest children here, hoping for academic excellence and prestigious university placements. Overseeing the school's foreign language program was Ms. Aiko Tanaka, a beloved and enigmatic teacher known for her mastery of linguistics, soft-spoken demeanor, and obsessive focus on silence and discipline in her classroom. Her students often joked about her near-religious adherence to silence as a virtue. But in 2015, a string of student disappearances would reveal that Miss Tanaka's obsession with language was not about communication, but control, and that her teachings masked a dark philosophy with fatal consequences. Miss Tanaka had been with Higashi for nearly a decade, rising quickly to become head of the language department. Her classroom was always pristine, white walls, low lighting, no decorations. She insisted on ritualized behavior. Students bowed 3 times before entering, placed their phones in locked boxes, and remained silent unless spoken to. Her lessons, however, were celebrated, immersive, intense, and oddly hypnotic. Tanaka claimed to have developed a new method of language acquisition, one that allowed students to speak with the soul, not the tongue. She recruited students into her advanced study group, a secretive club that met after hours. Entry was by invitation only. Those chosen were the top performers, and parents saw it as a sign of their child's brilliance. But in the winter term of 2015, 4 students vanished in a single month, all members of the advanced study group. At first, school officials claimed the students had withdrawn due to illness or family emergencies. But when Junpei Sato, one of the missing students' younger brothers, received a letter in the mail addressed in his siblings' handwriting, things began to unravel. The letter contained only a single sentence. "She took my voice. Now she wants my name. Don't let her have it." Alarmed, Junpei's family contacted police, who launched an investigation into Higashi Academy. When authorities arrived, they found the school eerily quiet, most students unaware of the disappearances or too afraid to speak. Miss Tanaka was calm, providing meticulously kept attendance records, showing all students accounted for. But under scrutiny, the documents revealed forgeries, and a search of her office uncovered audio tapes labeled only with numbers and dates. What was on those tapes shook the investigation team. Recordings of students chanting in monotone, repeating words in unknown languages, interspersed with cries, pleas, and long silences broken by Tanaka's voice. "You are not your name. You are not your voice. Leave them here. Leave them with me." Further searches revealed a sealed room beneath the language lab, accessible only through a hidden panel. Inside were 4 desks, each with restraints, surrounded by speakers emitting low-frequency tones. The walls were lined with pages of written script, hundreds of languages, ancient and modern, but with sections blacked out, as if erasing parts of meaning. In one corner, police found personal belongings of the missing students, notebooks, uniforms, and in one chilling discovery, sheets of paper with their names written over and over, then violently crossed out. Miss Tanaka was arrested at dawn, found in her dormitory room reciting foreign phrases and writing furiously in a language later identified as Glagolitic, one of the oldest known Slavic alphabets. During interrogation, she refused to speak Japanese, insisting she had abandoned her native tongue and that her students had done the same. She claimed they had passed the final exam and were free from the burden of self. Despite extensive searches, the missing students were never found. Tanaka was ruled mentally unfit for trial, committed to a psychiatric facility where she remained silent for 6 years before vanishing from her cell under mysterious circumstances. All that remained was a note, written in her signature neat script. "When the voice ends, truth begins." NTHE school closed the language wing permanently. Higashi's enrollment plummeted, and the academy was eventually shuttered. Locals believe the building is haunted by voices, and that on quiet nights, the wind carries echoes of chanting, fragments of languages no longer spoken. Families of the missing students still receive blank letters, postmarked from distant countries, containing only one word each time: silence. In the industrial city of Monterrey, Mexico, where factory smoke curled into the skyline and the hum of machines was constant, Colegio de las Estrellas stood as a gleaming beacon of modern education. The school was famed for its advanced science programs, funded by wealthy benefactors and corporate sponsors, who saw it as a breeding ground for the next generation of engineers and chemists. Its laboratories were state-of-the-art, its curriculum grueling. At the center of this high-pressure world was Professor Matias Ortega, head of the chemistry department, a man known for his unmatched knowledge, charisma, and eerie ability to make complex chemical reactions feel like magic. His classes were always full, his students devoted, and his name was spoken with reverence, until a fire in Lab 3A, a series of missing students, and a disturbing discovery in a hidden storeroom exposed Ortega's true experiments, ones that had nothing to do with science fair medals and everything to do with control, cruelty, and a personal quest for synthetic perfection. Ortega had come to Colegio de las Estrellas in 2004, quickly rising to prominence. Rumors of his past were vague. He claimed to have worked in private industry, and his references were glowing but sparse. He wore custom gloves, claiming a past chemical injury, and often lectured about the responsibility of knowledge, warning students not to pursue science for vanity or power. Ironically, his own pursuit was just that, a quest to perfect the human mind and body through chemical manipulation, beginning with his own students. In 2012, it all began to unravel. And over the course of 6 months, students from Ortega's Advanced Chemistry Club began falling ill, reporting blackouts, memory gaps, and uncontrollable tremors. Several withdrew from school. One was hospitalized with liver failure, his blood showing traces of rare compounds not found in legal substances. Parents began demanding answers, but Ortega deflected blame, insisting the students had experimented irresponsibly or had outside exposures. He offered to help investigate, even volunteering to analyze samples. The administration trusted him. After all, who else could they turn to? Then came the fire. In April 2012, a small explosion rocked Lab 3A. During a weekend, Ortega claimed he was away. Firefighters extinguished the flames quickly, but behind a false wall revealed by the blast, they found a secret lab, not listed in blueprints, filled with chemical vats, unlabeled vials, and most disturbingly, rows of student files, each marked with doses, behavioral changes, and test results. Ortega had been conducting unauthorized experiments, injecting students under the guise of enhancement trials. His notes detailed a compound he called sublimus, designed to eliminate fear, doubt, and pain, creating perfect focus and compliance. The formula was experimental, derived from industrial solvents, black market nootropics, and his own concoctions. Surveillance revealed that students in his club were administered these substances unknowingly through tainted lab equipment, or under the pretense of routine testing. Side effects included psychosis, organ damage, and in some cases, complete personality collapse. The files also revealed 3 missing students, previously marked as transferred. Their guardians had received letters, all typed, all bearing Ortega's signature, explaining sudden opportunities abroad. Investigators found the students' belongings hidden in the secret lab, along with blood samples and recordings of Ortega's sessions. In one, a student cries, "I can't feel anything anymore, please make it stop," to which Ortega responds, "You are almost perfect. One more dose." Ortega was arrested at the school gates, trying to flee. In custody, he claimed he had, quote, achieved something magnificent, that his work would redefine humanity, and that his students were sacrifices for a better species. He showed no remorse, only disappointment that he was interrupted. He was convicted of multiple counts of aggravated assault, illegal medical experimentation, and manslaughter, as 2 of the missing students' remains were found in acid vats beneath the lab floor, reduced to bones, but identified through dental records. Colegio de las Estrellas was shut down permanently. The site remains abandoned, the lab sealed. Locals say they still smell chemicals on the wind, and that on certain nights, lights flicker in Lab 3A as if Ortega's work continues, somewhere beneath the floor, where knowledge was twisted into terror and where brilliance became a poison. In the hilltop town of Civita di Bagnoregio, central Italy, a medieval village often called the Dying City, due to its crumbling cliffs and thin footbridge connection to the outside world. Beauty and decay intertwined in every stone and alleyway. The town's only secondary school, Liceo delle Arti Antiche, was a small, elite institution focused on classical art, history, and fine craftsmanship. Here, students from around Italy came to learn in ancient studios lit by natural light and filled with centuries-old murals. Overseeing the prestigious art department was Professor Alessio Morini, a man renowned for his restoration work and hauntingly realistic portraiture. He was quiet, refined, and obsessive, particularly about preserving the soul of art. But in 2007, the school and the world of art was shaken when a series of students vanished and authorities discovered that Morini's masterworks were more than oil and pigment. They were preserved bodies, lacquered and painted, hidden beneath layers of canvas and varnish. He wasn't restoring art. He was capturing life, forever. Morini had returned to Civita in 1998 after years abroad. He had studied in Florence, Paris, and Vienna, and spoke often of his time with secretive restoration societies, where true artists were taught to see beyond the surface. He taught students classical techniques, but with an unusual twist. He insisted that a true portrait must contain the breath of the subject, not just likeness, but essence. His advanced studio class was invitation only, and students considered it an honor. But those accepted into it began to withdraw from others, often seen working late at night, their fingers stained with deep red hues, their faces pale and tired. NTHE first disappearance was of Chiara Bellini, a 17-year-old prodigy. Her parents were told she had accepted an apprenticeship in Venice, but no travel records existed. 2 weeks later, Luca Ferraro, another advanced student, vanished. Morini again produced letters, forged signatures, and even fake acceptance emails to prestigious art programs. The school, proud of its reputation, did not question him until a visiting inspector, touring the school's private gallery, noticed something unsettling in Morini's latest piece. A life-sized portrait of a young girl, her face disturbingly similar to Chiara's, but with eyes too real, and a texture to the skin that looked almost organic. A deeper investigation into the gallery revealed multiple portraits, all uncatalogued, all of missing students, and all with surfaces that, under infrared scanning, revealed bone structures beneath. Police raided Morini's private studio, where they found a concealed chamber beneath the floor. Inside were half-finished portraits, human remains, and jars of preservative fluids. His method was grotesque and precise. He killed his students, drained their blood, preserved their skin and muscle tissue with chemical treatments, and mounted them as frames for his art. Over time, he painted directly onto their preserved bodies, using fine layers of oils to transform them into lifelike portraits that stood upright, silent, and eternally posed. In his personal journals, Morini wrote of the soul capture, believing that by preserving the body's form, he could trap the spirit within. He called his work immortalization and claimed his students had volunteered, seeking eternal artistic legacy. One entry read, "Kiara's hands trembled as I began, but in the stillness of death, her beauty is now timeless." He viewed the process not as murder, but as elevation, transforming his pupils into true art, free from decay, emotion, or time. Morini was arrested while preparing another subject. In court, he was cold and proud, showing no remorse. When shown his victims' portraits, he whispered, "They are perfect now. They live forever." He was sentenced to life imprisonment, but died in custody within a year under suspicious circumstances. His body found covered in paint, his eyes gouged out, and a final portrait of himself drawn in blood on his cell wall. NTHE Gallery was dismantled, and the preserved bodies given proper burials. The school was closed indefinitely. Today, the abandoned studio stands as a ruin, but locals report that at night, figures appear in the windows, pale and unmoving, as if watching, still posed, still waiting. Tourists sometimes hear soft weeping or the creak of an easel moving in the darkness. The town rarely speaks of Morini, but his work remains dark, immortal, and unfinished. At the edge of Busan, South Korea, nestled between rising apartment towers and ancient temples, was Changgong Technical High School, a stern, tradition-bound institution known for producing disciplined, obedient graduates destined for military service or corporate apprenticeships. The school's gray facade loomed over the neighborhood like a relic of another era, its windows narrow, its halls echoing with the regimented footsteps of students in identical uniforms. The man behind its fearsome reputation was Vice Principal Han Jae-won, a figure revered by some, feared by many. With a perfectly ironed suit, a thin leather cane always in hand, and a voice rarely raised above a whisper, Han was the architect of a secret regime of discipline, one that for years operated in the shadows of the school's basement, unseen, unspoken, but always felt. In 2003, a chance encounter, a hidden door, and a former student's suicide note would force Changgong to face the truth it had long ignored, that Han's concept of education was rooted in control, psychological domination, and ritualized punishment that left permanent scars. Han Jae-won had served at Changgong since the early 1980s. He was praised for improving graduation rates, reducing truancy, and instilling, quote, old-school values. Under his watch, rules multiplied, infractions for untidy hair, speaking out of turn, or poor grades resulted in mandatory remediation. But unlike other schools, Changgong had no official detention records. Disciplinary matters were handled in-house, with students sent directly to Han's correction wing, a rarely visited annex behind the main building. Those who went rarely spoke of it afterward. Some transferred, others changed schools. A few dropped out entirely. But no one, not parents, staff, or administrators, ever questioned the outcomes. Han's authority was absolute. NTHE first break came when Kim Ji-hoon, a former student who had left Changgong 5 years prior, was found dead in his apartment, and apparent suicide. Among his belongings was a sealed envelope addressed to a local journalist containing photographs, drawings, and a letter. In it, Kim detailed his time in Han's correction wing, the metal chair bolted to the floor, the soundproof walls, and the sessions where students were blindfolded, deprived of sleep, and forced to recite apologies until they collapsed. He described Han's obsession with obedience, how he recorded every session on reel-to-reel tapes, and how students were rewarded for informing on each other, creating a web of paranoia and silence. The journalist contacted police, and the story exploded into public view. When authorities entered the correction wing, they found a labyrinth of rooms concealed behind false walls. Inside were padded cells, restraint chairs, and shelves lined with labeled cassette tapes, thousands of them, each marked with a student's name, date, and infraction. Playback revealed hours of verbal degradation, forced confessions, and in some cases, the sound of physical strikes, followed by whimpers, crying, or long silences. In one tape, Han's voice could be heard saying, "You are not a person. You are a problem. I am fixing. When you leave, you will be perfect, or you will not leave." Further investigation uncovered journals where Han documented his methods, referring to students not by name but as subjects. He wrote of extraction of disobedience, the purification of behavior, and the art of unmaking and remaking boys. He believed himself a moral surgeon, excising weakness from students before they entered the real world. Over 200 students were identified from the tapes, and many came forward with accounts of lifelong trauma, mental breakdowns, and persistent nightmares. One student, now an adult, recalled being locked for 3 days in a lightless room with only a recording of Han's voice playing, "I see you. I know your thoughts. You are not allowed to think." Han Jae-won was arrested without resistance. At trial, he defended his actions as traditional discipline, claiming Korea had lost its moral backbone and that he had simply preserved the old ways. He expressed no regret, only lamenting that his quote, corrections would now go unfinished. He was convicted of false imprisonment, assault, and psychological abuse, receiving a 30-year sentence. Changgang Technical High School was shuttered, its buildings left to rot. Yet to this day, locals avoid the grounds, saying they hear soft, rhythmic chanting at night and the faint creak of a cane on concrete, as if Han's rituals continue in the dark. In the sleepy village of Wilsberg, Germany, known for its forested hills, ancient castle ruins, and a history few dared to discuss, stood St. Norbert's Gymnasium, a private Catholic school perched on the edge of the Teutoburg forest. Founded after the war, the school prided itself on order, tradition, and a strict classical education. At the heart of its academic prestige was Herr Klaus Richter, the head of the history department, a man who spoke with authority, dressed impeccably, and held his students in silent awe. For over 30 years, Richter had taught history with meticulous precision, insisting on first-hand records, original manuscripts, and truth above all else. But his truth was a curated one, buried beneath the floorboards of the school chapel, hidden in a locked underground room. Richter had amassed thousands of documents, objects, and recordings, not to educate, but to control the past, to reshape it, and ultimately to erase it. Richter was a respected figure in Wilsberg, often invited to speak at memorials and civic events. He spoke with somber reverence of Germany's complex past, and his lectures on World War II, the Cold War, and post-war reconstruction were considered unmatched. Yet within the school, rumors swirled. Students noticed that certain events, particularly the Nazi era, the Wilsberg SS history, and specific local disappearances from the 1940s, were never discussed or were altered subtly in his lectures. When questioned, Richter dismissed such topics as unsuitable for young minds. NTHE First Cracks appeared when Lisa Baumgartner, a student researching her own family's history for a term project, uncovered a missing relative, Anna Baumgartner, who had attended St. Norbert's in 1944 and vanished without a trace. Seeking help, she asked Richter for guidance, who sternly forbade her from continuing the research. Suspicious, Lisa confided in her older brother, a journalist in Berlin. Together, they began digging into school archives, only to find gaps in the official records, entire yearbooks missing, and student lists altered. Their search led them to the basement of the school chapel, sealed for decades. One stormy night in November 2016, they broke in. Beneath rotting floorboards, behind a rusted grate, they found a hidden archive room, lined with rows of filing cabinets, shelves of artifacts, and audio recordings, each meticulously labeled. What they found was staggering. Confession tapes, letters, photographs, and written testimonies from students and staff dating back to the 1930s and 40s, all documenting collaboration with Nazi officers, forced student labor, and executions that took place within the school grounds. Richter had not only known, but had spent his life collecting, suppressing, and in some cases fabricating records to rewrite history. His most chilling possession, a series of recordings labeled Erziehung or re-education, in which he interrogated elderly villagers, coercing them into confessions or denials, then using the tapes to decide what to preserve and what to destroy. Lisa's brother leaked the discovery to the press. Police raided the school, arresting Richter in his study, where he was found burning documents. He confessed to nothing, instead whispering, "History is not what happened. It's what survives." In his personal ledger, police found a list of names, students, staff, villagers, each marked with symbols. Many were deceased. Some were missing. One entry, dated 2001, read, "Baumgartner, the granddaughter, watching, must intervene." Richter was charged with historical suppression, illegal detainment, and destruction of public records. During the trial, it was revealed that at least 5 missing students from the 1940s had never left the school. Their remains found buried beneath the archive room, sealed in crates labeled Unsorted History, NST. Norbert's was closed permanently, and the archive was turned over to federal historians. Yet many of the materials were so heavily redacted, their full meaning remained elusive. Richter died in custody months later, leaving behind only a cryptic note, "Truth is clay. I was the sculptor." Today, Wheelsburg remains haunted by the discovery. Locals avoid the chapel, claiming to hear scratching beneath the floor and the soft, echoing voice of Richter, repeating a phrase that once ended every lesson. Those who forget the past are free to repeat it.